Well, yeah, but what about Darwin's finches? Doesn't that prove evolution is true? Well, there were finches in Darwin's day. There are still finches today. Where's the evolution? Yeah, some of them have different kinds of beaks, different sizes of beaks, but now they know that some of those, they'll change back and forth in the same bunch of birds, whether it's a season that's easy to get food or a season that they have to peck around a lot, their beaks get longer, gets shorter. There's no evolution there.
On the Origins of Species by Means of Natural Selection is the title of Darwin's book, Mr. Martin. Welcome to the observable process of natural selection, which is key and fundamental to evolution. That is what Darwin's finches display, the way in which various factors from environmental pressure to competition leads to the exaggeration of pre-existing features which are favourable for survival. This includes selecting from newly mutated ones. I attempted to find the case you spoke of, but could only find one example of something similar, displaying why you should source your arguments. So in this case I found a new population of a larger ground finch settled on the same island as a smaller species of ground finch in 1982. For a time this put some pressure on the smaller finch, the larger finches dominating the feeding grounds with their larger beaks. Thus the small finch went through character displacement, where the beaks got smaller slowly to cope with the competition in being able to eat the smaller seeds that the larger finches were not interested in. This process was then kicked into overdrive by a severe drought in the years of 2003 and 2004. This is an observable example of natural selection and the effects of pressure, both from competition and the shifting environment, aka punctuated equilibrium.
But don't those peppered moths prove evolution is true? Well, we're told in the Industrial Revolution, here comes the birds are eating all the one-colored moths because the tree trunks are covered with dust from the Industrial Revolution. That's natural selection. Well, there's some problems there. Number one, the pictures in the textbook, most of those pictures, those moths don't even live on tree trunks. They glued the moths to the tree trunks. Okay, that didn't become public knowledge till about 1999. They glued the moths to the tree trunks to take the pictures. Fact is, there were light and dark colored moths before. There were light and dark colored moths during the Industrial Revolution. There's light and dark colored moths today. Where is the evolution? Is there any new genetic material in the birds, in the finches, in the moths? No, there's no new genetic material whatsoever. Their basic DNA remains the same. There's no evolution there, anywhere, at all.
First of all, I just love this. Pepper moths do in fact hide on tree trunks during the day. Problem, it's not always down on the base of the trunk where it's easy to see. It can be up in the canopy, on the branches, etc. If you did not know, Mr. Martin, moths can fly. There are also numerous studies which not only show that peppered moths live in trees, but their preference on just where to rest during the day. So what you have just said is a load of utter bollocks, quite simply. There have also been unstaged photos of both black and white moths. As for there already being black and white moths, correct. This study is designed to show the process of natural selection. We are not around long enough to observe the mutation of new material in most animal populations. Reminder, it took E. coli 20,000 generations to evolve an entirely new strand of DNA and another 11,000 for it to become an active gene. Moths typically have a yearly cycle. We do not have 31,000 years to spare, Mr. Martin, which is why we use bacteria to show the evolution of new material. This case study is solely used to display the process of natural selection.
Well, doesn't evolution require and demand the input of new genetic information? Yes, it does. Otherwise, no true evolution has occurred. So far, we don't know of anything that has new genetic information anywhere. And the birds sure don't have it. Well, yeah, but don't those chemicals change? Can't those chemicals produce evolution? Well, chemicals obey laws, but they can't generate new information. Evolutionists can't give one example in nature. I'm talking in nature. I'm not talking in a lab, in a controlled situation. They can't give one example in nature of a random chance mutation, that's a change in a gene, that increases or produces new genetic information in the genome. Not one. Zero. Now, there's recombinations of genes. There's genes that drop out. But new information? No. Characteristically, information is lost.
Except for the entire field of genetics disagrees with you. That's kind of a big issue. I'll source two down below. One deals with early mammalian evolution, the other deals with evolution of great apes, both chimps and man included. As for outside the lab, due to the fact that only bacteria have a rate of reproduction fast enough to observe, you are being unreasonable. The E. coli experiment was done in controlled conditions. You can check the experiment for yourself. If it wasn't done in controlled conditions, you just argue that it was a freak accident caused by some external chemical or something.
Dr. Lee Spetner, in his book, Not by Chance, says this: not even one mutation has been observed that adds a little information to the genome. Not even one. He's an expert on information. Well, then where's the evolution? You see, there's a way that seemeth right unto a man, but its end thereof are the ways of death. There's no evidence for it, but as Lewontin said, as Watson said, we will not believe in God. We will believe in materialism no matter what the evidence shows us. So the issue, you see, is God. It has nothing to do with science. Now, they've made us out to be the religious people. Well, we can't teach creation in the schools. That's religion. We're going to teach science. We're going to teach evolution. Their evolution is just as religious as our creation.
No, he's a physicist, and as shown, I've already given you an example in E. coli. Evolution has all the evidence, as shown from the fact that thus far, throughout your talk, you have not brought forward a single thread of evidence for creationism, so don't pretend that they're on the same level.
Now, I think natural selection and survival of the fittest fit the creation model. Let's say this. Let's say we have three mooses. Mooses. We have three moose. Meese. We have three mooses, meeses. And we've got these three mooses, moose. We got one female, two males. Okay. Now, we have one male, he's evolving out of moosehood. We have one male, big, strong moose male. They're going to fight over the female. Which moose will get the female? The biggest, strongest, most moosish moose will get the female, right? That is survival of the fittest. The fittest survive. God built that into his different kinds in the creation.
And sure, there we have it, the term kinds. Fact is, what makes one moose superior to the other, especially if they're both from the same parent? Simple, mutation, aka natural variation.
So that the strongest of the kind survive, and it protects the kind. So it's just the opposite of what evolution tries to present. I think that's very interesting. Now, if you had a picture, and let's say you have a coelacanth fish, and you have a fern, and you just looked at the picture, would you say the coelacanth and the fern are related? No, you would say, no, they're not related. Let's say you have a field, and over here's a tree, and then over here stands a horse. And you look at the tree, and you look at the horse. Would you say they are ancestors of each other somehow? They have ancestors, common ancestors. No, you would not say that. If you have a man standing next to a chimpanzee, and here you have the man, and here you have the chimpanzee down there on its knuckles, would you say the man and the chimpanzee are related? No, you wouldn't say that at all. Well, then why do we think they're related? Well, one of the reasons is because a very bright evolutionist a few decades ago got a good idea. We'll draw some lines in. And once we draw the lines in, we have our tree of life. Everything is related back to that one cell. And now you can just see it plain as day. Of course, the horse is related to the tree. You can see it. They're all coming from the same place, you see? Except in the textbooks, the lines don't have anything on them. It's just lines. Well, why is that? Well, that's where the missing links are. Now, they've changed the names of missing links. They don't call them missing links anymore. They call them transitional forms. That's the code word for missing links. Now, why did they do that? Well, if you say the transitional forms, they don't sound nearly as missing as if you say the missing link. Okay, so that's what they do now.
The term was also made redundant by genetics. On top of this, every generation is quote-unquote a missing link, ergo your demand for each stage is completely absurd. The facts remain. We have a good enough fossil record which matches with the genetic mapping to prove evolution beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Now look what Stephen Gould says from Harvard. The extreme rarity of transitional forms in the fossil record. Now extreme rarity means zilch.
Whoa, hold on a second. Breaking the ninth commandment much? You can't just take what someone has said and then go, that's not what they meant. He meant what I want him to mean. Rarity means rare, Mr. Martin, i.e. still present but not in vast quantity. Also, fossil collections have been combined and sifted through since then as nations have come together to make a more complete collection. To top this off, we also now have genetics backing our mapping of the fossil record.
Transitional forms, that's the code word for missing link. All he's saying here is, in the fossil, the missing links are still missing. That's all he's saying. But he says that persists as the trade secret of the fossil experts, the paleontologists. They have a little secret. There's nothing there in the fossils to prove evolution is true. He says the evolutionary trees that adorn our textbooks, well, those are the ones that have the one cell, and then over here's the horse, and here's the tree, and they're all hooked up. The evolutionary trees that adorn our textbooks have data only at the tips and nodes of the branches. The rest is inference. That means a big guess. However reasonable, not the evidence of fossils, says Stephen Jay Gould back in Natural History magazine a while back.
Your job must be so damned easy with having an audience who will not question what you say. Fact is, the very realization that you have to go back 29 years before your talk to find such a quote just reveals that creationism cannot survive in a modern, interconnected world of information. It must argue from the past because it belongs in the past, the skeleton of a belief now nearly extinct.
So we're supposed to believe then that this simple cell just popped up and then gave birth to everything else. Well, a cell is not that simple. By the way, they don't like to talk about the cell membrane. Do you know the cell membrane, it's like it has its own brain? A cell membrane, you can have a solution 1/2000% show up at the cell membrane. Say, I want in. And the cell membrane, nope, you can't come in. I can only let a 1/1000th solution in, not 2/1000th solution in. I mean, it can tell the difference at incredible small concentrations. It can tell the difference. How does it do that?
Well, certain chemicals react with certain chemicals, resulting in compounds which then have a whole new set of reaction laws. Physics and chemistry, rather simply. Also, cells don't have to start off as complex cells. You can have protocells that metabolize, move, take in new information, and even self-replicate when they reach a certain size, all from chemicals found in primordial times. However, in our modern environment, the issue is that if such a primitive cell were to form or even remain, they would be consumed by more modern and more advanced cells. That's why we no longer find cells below a certain threshold. Darwin himself knew of this issue at his time, as shown with the quote on screen. But the fact is, science has progressed since then, and we now have the tools in the lab to test abiogenesis, as we are doing.
Well, God made it that way, to protect life. So the cell has all these amazing things in it. So Dr. Leon Long, down there at the University of Texas, in his textbook, Geology, his chapter on the origin and evolution of life, he says this: among the first organisms were the lowly bacteria and blue-green algae. By the way, true or false? Does God say, I want you to know I made blue-green algae first? No. He has picked some of the most simple things to make his point. And he says this: among the first organisms were the lowly bacteria and blue-green algae. They are about as simple as a self-sufficient cell can be, which is none too simple. Considering a bacterium can synthesize some 3,000 to 6,000 compounds at a rate of about 1 million reactions per second. We can't even build a city that can do that. You're sitting there right now with a little cell. You can't even see it without a microscope. It has 3,000 to 6,000 chemical factories inside of itself, making chemical compounds of a rate of 1 million reactions per second, and you don't explode? Unbelievable. But our God did that, you see. The Creator did that. And he did it so we could marvel and give him glory and give him praise.
Of course, I don't understand, this is hard, therefore God. When you fail to give substantial reasoning and linking as well as any evidence for your proposed creator, just say it just is.
Well, what does evolution claim then? All organisms are related through a common ancestry. That's that tree of life. They're all related. That means you are related to ferns. You are related to bacteria. All organisms arose through the process of mutation and natural selection. Wait a minute. In order for that to happen, you'd have to add new information to that original blue-green algae to get people. There's no evidence they can add any information to the genome. I just read you a quote. All organisms arose and persist because of random chance processes of nature and millions of years. Give us the time and it'll happen, says the evolution. Evolution demands millions of years.
And thus far you have yet to bring any evidence of the contrary to the table. Interesting, that little fact. Also, on the millions of years thing, I love the way you want to portray it as ludicrous, even though we now leave the field of biology and now you deny nuclear physics. The irony is just outstanding.